Everyone assumes the Skinwalker was hunting us. That's the part everyone gets wrong. I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm not selling a book. I'm not promoting a podcast. I don't even use my real name anymore. I'm telling you this because someone needs to know, and because what happened in that desert in 2019 changed everything I thought I understood about the world. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was a wildlife photographer working on a project about nocturnal predators in the American Southwest. Coyotes mostly. Sometimes bobcats. The kind of work that requires you to be alone in very dark places with very expensive camera equipment and a frankly concerning lack of common sense. If this were a horror movie, this is where I'd make a bad decision. Unfortunately, this was real life, which means I made about 6 bad decisions before the really bad one. The location was a stretch of high desert in northern New Mexico, about 40 miles from the nearest gas station and maybe 80 from anything resembling civilization. The kind of place where your cell phone becomes an expensive paperweight and your car radio picks up one AM station that plays the same 6 country songs on a loop until you start to question your sanity. I wasn't alone. I had my friend Marcus with me. Ex-Marine, current park ranger, the kind of guy who brings a first aid kit to a barbecue. If anyone was going to keep me from doing something catastrophically stupid, it was Marcus. Spoiler alert, even Marcus couldn't prepare us for this. It was October. The air had that crystal quality it gets in the desert when the temperature drops. We'd set up about 2 miles from the truck, in a small canyon where I had photographed a coyote den the week before. The plan was simple: stay quiet, stay still, get the shots, get out. At 11:47 p.m., I saw it for the first time. It was standing on the ridge above us. Perfectly still. Perfectly wrong. Marcus saw it too. I know because his hand found my shoulder and squeezed once. The universal signal for don't move, and please tell me you're seeing this too. Here's what I remember. It was tall. Taller than any coyote had a right to be. It stood on 4 legs, but the proportions were off. Too long in the spine. Too narrow in the hips. And the way it held its head, slightly tilted, like it was listening to something we couldn't hear. We didn't move. Neither did it. This went on for maybe 3 minutes. Maybe 30 seconds. Time does weird things when your brain is trying to process something it doesn't have a category for. Then it did something I'll never forget. It sat down. Like a dog. And it waited. That's when I knew something was very, very wrong. Because predators don't sit and wait unless they're watching something. And the way it was positioned, the direction it was facing, it wasn't watching us. The Skinwalker didn't attack. It watched. And it was afraid. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand what a Skinwalker is supposed to be. Or at least, what the stories say. The Navajo call them Yinaldushii. Literally translated, with it, he goes on all 4s. In the mythology, they're witches. People who've crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed, committed an act so profoundly evil that they've transformed themselves into something else. Something that can take the shape of animals. Something that hunts at night. Even telling this story feels like breaking a rule. The Navajo don't talk about skinwalkers casually. There's a belief that speaking about them draws their attention. That naming them gives them power. But here's the thing about American folklore. White people love to borrow indigenous horror and turn it into entertainment. So the Skinwalker has become this catch-all boogeyman for any weird thing that happens in the Southwest. Strange animal on the road? Skinwalker. Coyote that looked at you weird? Skinwalker. Neighbor you don't like? Probably a Skinwalker. I used to find this darkly funny. The way we take sacred stories and turn them into campfire tales. How we strip them of context and meaning until they're just another monster in the catalog. I don't find it funny anymore. The stories describe skinwalkers as appearing almost right, but not quite. A coyote with human eyes. A dog with hands instead of paws. An elf that walks on two legs when it thinks you're not looking. They're said to mimic voices, to tap on windows, to make you feel watched even when you can't see anything. They're associated with witchcraft, with death, with the corruption of natural law. In every story, they're evil. Purely, simply, irredeemably evil. I talked to a rancher once, back when I was researching this project. This was before. He was probably 70, had lived in New Mexico his entire life. I asked him if he believed in skinwalkers. He looked at me like I'd asked if he believed in rain. "Doesn't matter if I believe," he said. "They're there either way." Then he told me about the time he saw one. Or thought he did. A coyote that followed his truck for 15 miles, keeping pace at 60 miles per hour, never falling behind, never getting closer. Just matching his speed exactly until he crossed some invisible boundary and it stopped. "What did you do?" I asked. "Kept driving," he said. "And I didn't look back." Every single person who says they don't believe in skinwalkers also has a story. That's what I learned. They'll laugh it off, call it superstition, make jokes about too much peyote or not enough sleep. But then, quietly, almost reluctantly, they'll tell you about the thing they saw. The thing that didn't make sense. The thing they'd never quite been able to explain. A retired park ranger told me about sounds in the canyon that sounded like his daughter calling for help. His daughter was in Phoenix at the time. A truck driver told me about headlights that followed him through the desert but disappeared whenever he tried to get a better look. A teacher told me about the elk that stood outside her window every night for a week, perfectly still, staring in. She said its eyes looked sad. But none of those stories explain what I saw that night. None of them explain why it looked afraid. Let me back up and give you the full picture of how we ended up there. The project was supposed to be straightforward. Document nocturnal predator behavior in their natural habitat. I'd been working on it for 8 months, traveling through Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, building a portfolio that would hopefully land me a contract with National Geographic or at least a decent gallery show. Marcus came along because he had 2 weeks of leave and because he'd grown up in these deserts. He knew the land. He knew the dangers. Dehydration, exposure, flash floods, the occasional territorial mountain lion. Standard stuff. We'd picked this particular location because I'd been monitoring it for 3 weeks. The coyote den was active. The pack was healthy. The lighting was good. Everything was ideal. We arrived at sunset, hiked in while there was still light, set up our equipment in a small cluster of rocks that gave us cover and a good vantage point. 2 cameras with night vision, 1 audio recorder, a thermos of coffee, and enough granola bars to survive a nuclear winter. The first few hours were perfect. Too perfect. We got footage of the pack. We got audio. We got exactly what we came for. Then, around 11:30, everything stopped. The coyotes went silent. Not gradually. Instantly. Like someone had hit a mute button on the entire desert. Marcus noticed it first. He'd been scanning the ridge with binoculars, and he lowered them slowly. "That's not right," he said. I looked up from my camera. "What's not right?" "Listen." I listened. Nothing. No insects. No wind. No distant highway sounds. Just this profound, suffocating silence that made my ears ring. Then we saw it. The shape on the ridge. At first, I thought it was a coyote. A big one, maybe, but still within the range of normal. Then it stood up. Not all the way. Not like a person. But it lifted its front half, just for a moment, and I saw the length of its forelegs. Too long. Jointed in too many places. It dropped back down, and that's when it sat. Haunches on the ground, head up, perfectly alert. Marcus's hand was still on my shoulder. I could feel his pulse through his fingertips. "We should go," he whispered. I wanted to agree. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to pack up and run. But something stopped me. Maybe it was professional curiosity. Maybe it was denial. Maybe I just couldn't accept what I was seeing. Because here's the thing, it wasn't acting like a predator. Predators stalk. They circle. They look for weakness. They commit or they retreat. This thing was acting like a guard. We stayed frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably closer to 10 minutes. The creature didn't move. We didn't move. It was the strangest standoff I've ever experienced. Then Marcus said something that still gives me chills. "It's protecting something." "From what?" I asked. He didn't answer. But I felt him shift, and when I glanced at him, he was looking past the creature, into the darkness beyond the ridge. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Low. Rhythmic. Almost like breathing, but too deep, too slow. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The creature on the ridge tensed. Its head lowered. And for the first time, I heard it make a sound. It was a growl, but not like any animal I'd ever heard. It had layers to it. Multiple tones at once. It made my teeth hurt. And it wasn't growling at us. It was growling at whatever was making that breathing sound. The next 15 minutes were the longest of my life. The creature on the ridge remained perfectly still, but its posture had changed. Every muscle was coiled. Ready. Whatever it was facing, it considered it a threat. And we were caught in between. Marcus started packing up our equipment with careful, deliberate movements. No sudden motions. No noise. I joined him, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped a lens cap. The breathing sound grew louder. Closer. Then came the smell. I've worked with dead animals before. I've smelled decomposition in every stage. I've cleaned out traps where coyotes had been dead for days in the summer heat. This was worse. This was rot, yes, but also something chemical. Something wrong. Like meat that had gone bad, but was somehow still alive. Marcus gagged. I heard him spit quietly. "We need to move," he said. "Now!" But before we could take a step, the creature did something that froze us in place. It looked at us. Directly at us. And its eyes caught the moonlight. They were brown. Not the reflective green or gold you see in animal eyes at night. Brown. Human brown. And in that moment, I understood why people call them skinwalkers. Because whatever I was looking at, it had been human once. Or it knew what humans were. Or it was something wearing the idea of humanity like an ill-fitting coat. Then it did something even stranger. It made a sound. Not a growl this time. A sound that was almost like a word. Guttural. Choked. Like someone trying to speak with the wrong-shaped mouth. It sounded like a warning. Marcus grabbed my arm. "It's telling us to run." "What?" "It's warning us. We need to go. Now." I wanted to argue. I wanted to understand. But then the breathing sound changed. It became faster. Excited. And I heard something else underneath it. A clicking. Like joints popping. Like bones scraping together. The creature on the ridge moved. Not toward us. Toward the sound. It positioned itself between us and whatever was coming. At that point, I would have taken the Skinwalker as emotional support. We ran. Not in a straight line back to the truck. That would have taken us closer to the breathing, clicking thing. We ran perpendicular, along the base of the ridge, keeping the Skinwalker between us and the other presence. I don't know how long we ran. Long enough that my lungs burned. Long enough that I lost a camera bag and didn't stop to retrieve it. long enough that Marcus, who'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan, was gasping. We stopped when we reached an outcropping of rock, pressed ourselves against it, tried to control our breathing. That's when I realized something that made everything worse. The Skinwalker had followed us. It was about 30 yards away, still between us and the direction we come from. Still watching. Still guarding. And behind it, I finally saw what it was afraid of. It was dark. That's the first thing I can tell you. Not dark like the absence of light. Dark like a presence. Like darkness itself had decided to take up space in the world. It moved wrong. Parts of it seemed to shift independently. I couldn't tell if it was one thing or many things. I couldn't tell if it was solid or if I was looking at empty space shaped like something. But I could feel it. The same way you can feel someone staring at you from across a room. The same way you know when you're not alone in a dark house. It was aware. It was intelligent. And it was hungry. The Skinwalker made that layered growling sound again. Louder this time. More desperate. That's when I realized something that changed everything. It wasn't watching us. It was watching behind us. No. I was wrong. It was watching what was in front of it. The dark thing. And we just happened to be in the way. We were collateral. Bystanders in a confrontation that had nothing to do with us. The Skinwalker wasn't hunting us. It was keeping something else from hunting us. We didn't sleep that night. We made it back to the truck around 3 a.m., locked ourselves inside, and sat there until sunrise with the engine running and the headlights on. Marcus didn't say a word for the first hour. Then he finally spoke. "That wasn't an animal." "I know," I said. "Either of them. Neither of them were animals." "I know." He looked at me. His face was pale. "What the fuck did we see?" I didn't have an answer. But I couldn't stop thinking about the way the Skinwalker had positioned itself. The way it had warned us. The way it had looked at us with those 2 human eyes and made the choking word-like sound. It was protecting us. Or at the very least, protecting the boundary between us and that other thing. Over the next few weeks, I did what I probably shouldn't have done. I researched. I talked to people. I drove back to that area, not to the exact location, but close enough to ask questions. I found patterns. Stories I dismissed as folklore suddenly made a different kind of sense. Every culture in that region had stories about guardians. Watchers. Things that lived on the edges of human space and kept other things at bay. The Navajo had the Skinwalker. The Hopi had their own versions. The Apache, the Ute, the Pueblo peoples. Different names, different specifics, but the same essential idea. Something lived in the spaces between. Something watched. And sometimes, something had to hold the line. I talked to an anthropologist at UNM. Older woman, specialized in Southwest indigenous folklore. I didn't tell her what I'd seen. I just asked about skinwalkers. She gave me the standard academic answer first. Shape-shifting witches, taboo subject, cultural sensitivity, etc. Then she said something that stuck with me. Every culture has stories about boundaries. About things that guard the threshold between the known world and the other world. In European folklore, you had black dogs, hellhounds, guardians of crossroads. In Celtic mythology, the Tsusith. In Japanese folklore, the Inagami. What about here? I asked. In the Southwest? She looked at me for a long moment. Here, the boundaries are different. Thinner. The desert is a liminal space. It's been sacred and dangerous for thousands of years. If you needed something to guard those boundaries, it would have to be strong. It would have to be feared. You think skinwalkers are guardians? I think, she said carefully, that we label things as evil when we don't understand their function. A guard dog looks terrifying if you're trying to break in. But if you're inside the house, you're grateful it's there. That conversation haunted me, because it reframed everything. What if skinwalkers weren't cursed? What if they were assigned? What if the stories got it backwards? What if the transformation wasn't a punishment, but a duty? I started looking at disappearances in the area. People who'd gone missing in the desert over the years. Hikers, campers, the occasional adventurer who'd wandered too far from marked trails. Most of them were never found. But the few who were, the few who came back, they told strange stories. One man said he'd been lost for 3 days. He was certain he was going to die. Then he saw what he described as a wolf that wasn't a wolf, watching him from a distance. It stayed there until sunrise, then vanished. He found his way back to the trailhead by noon. A woman reported being chased by something she couldn't see. She ran until she collapsed. When she woke up, there were tracks around her. Dog tracks, but wrong. Too large, too deep. She was 50 yards from a ranger station. No one believed them. They were dismissed as dehydration, exposure, hallucinations. But I believed them. Because I understood now. The skinwalker wasn't cursed. It was assigned. It was a guardian. A sentinel. The last line of defense between the human world and whatever lived in the spaces we weren't supposed to see. And that dark thing I'd seen? That breathing, clicking presence that moved like darkness given form? That was what the skinwalker was guarding against. That was what it spent its existence holding back. I went back one more time. I know I shouldn't have. Marcus refused to come with me. Said I was insane. Said I was going to get myself killed. He was probably right on both counts. But I needed to understand. I needed to see it again with fresh eyes. I went during the day. Brought enough water for a week, a GPS tracker, a satellite phone, and absolutely no cameras. I wasn't there to document. I was there to witness. I found the spot where we'd set up. Our equipment was gone, probably scavenged by animals or taken by the handful of people who passed through that area. But there were marks. Scratches in the rock. Deep gouges that formed patterns I didn't recognize. They looked deliberate. Intentional. I followed them. They led me higher into the canyon, to a place where the walls narrowed and the sunlight barely reached. That's where I found it. A cave mouth. Not large. Maybe 5 feet high, half hidden by brush and fallen rocks. The air coming out of it was cold. Not cool. Cold. Like winter air in the middle of October. And it smelled like that smell. Rot and chemicals and wrongness. I didn't go in. I'm not that stupid. But I stood at the entrance, and I looked into the darkness, and I understood. This was a threshold. A weak point. A place where the membrane between our world and something else had worn thin. And something was guarding it. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough that the sun shifted. Long enough that shadows started to creep across the canyon floor. Then I heard movement behind me. Soft. Careful. I turned slowly. The skinwalker was there. 30 feet away. Sitting. Watching. In the daylight, it looked even more wrong. Its fur was matted. Its proportions were nightmare geometry. But its eyes were still brown. Still human. We looked at each other for a long moment. Then it stood, turned, and walked away. Not hurrying. Not fleeing. Just leaving. Like its shift was over. Like it had shown me what I needed to see. I left too. Climbed out of that canyon and drove straight back to Albuquerque, and didn't stop until I was surrounded by people and lights and the comfortable noise of civilization. But I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd learned. Every culture had a monster for this place. The skinwalker was just the one still showing up for work. Indigenous peoples understood something we've forgotten. That the world is full of doors. That some of those doors should never be opened. and that something has to stand watch. We call them evil because we don't understand, because they're frightening, because they exist in a space between human and animal, between living and something else. But evil things don't usually warn you. Evil things don't position themselves between you and danger. Evil things don't guard. The Skinwalker I saw wasn't evil. It was tired. It was alone. It was doing a job that no one acknowledged and everyone feared. And the thing it was guarding against? The thing in that cave? That was what we should be afraid of. I left the Southwest after that. Took a job in Oregon photographing coastal wildlife. Bears and elk and seals. Things that make sense. Things that behave the way animals should behave. I don't talk about what happened. Marcus doesn't either. We have an unspoken agreement not to bring it up. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that canyon. I think about that cave. I think about what's down there, in the dark, pressing against the membrane of our reality. And I think about the thing standing watch. I did some follow-up research before I left. Found out that the area where we were has been closed to the public. Not officially. There's no government order, no signs, no barriers. It's just understood. The locals don't go there. The rangers don't patrol it. It's become an unofficial exclusion zone. I tried to find out why. Got a lot of non-answers. Budget cuts. Wildlife preservation. Cultural sensitivity. But I also found a pattern. Every 10 years or so someone goes in. Usually a tourist who doesn't know better or doesn't listen to warnings. Sometimes they come out. Sometimes they don't. The ones who do come out never talk about what they saw. But they leave. They pack up, they get in their cars, and they drive until they hit a coast. I understand that now. Some things you can't unknow. Some sights you can't unsee. I also found something else. Historical records. Accounts from Spanish explorers in the 1600s. Journals from American settlers in the 1800s. They all mention the same thing. Strange guardians. Watchers in the night. Things that looked like animals but weren't. And they all mention the same fear. Not of the watchers themselves, but of what the watchers were watching. This has been going on for centuries. Maybe longer. Maybe for as long as humans have lived in that desert. And the Skinwalkers, or whatever they really are, have been there the whole time. Holding the line. Keeping watch. No one thanks them. No one acknowledges them. We turn them into monsters, into villains, into cautionary tales. But they're still there. Still watching. Still guarding. I think about that sometimes. About the loneliness of it. About standing watch over something that would destroy everything you're trying to protect, and knowing that the people you're protecting will never understand. Will never appreciate it. Will only fear you. That's a special kind of hell. The last time I spoke to Marcus, about 6 months ago, he asked me if I thought we should tell someone. Go public. Warn people. I asked him what he thought would happen. Who would believe us? What would they do? Send a research team? Turn it into a tourist attraction? Try to weaponize it? We both knew the answer. The best protection that place has is obscurity. Is the stories that keep most people away. Is the Skinwalkers themselves. So we keep quiet. We carry this knowledge like a weight. And we hope that's enough. But I'll leave you with this. If you ever find yourself in the high desert of New Mexico, and you see something watching you from a distance, something that looks almost right but not quite, something that makes your instincts scream run, don't run. Not right away. Look at it carefully. Look at where it's positioned. Look at what it's watching. Because if it's watching you, you're probably fine. You're probably just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But if it's watching something behind you, or beside you, or in front of you, if it's placed itself between you and something else, then you need to understand something very clearly. The Skinwalker isn't your problem. Whatever it's protecting you from is your problem. Look at what it's afraid of. Then run. Yandy.